Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going beyond borders,
Okay.
beyond boundaries, to explore something that touches every aspect of our lives.
Right.
Globalization.
Yeah, and it's more than just a buzzword.
Right.
We're talking about a complex web of interconnectedness with threads that weave through our economies, our cultures, even our dinner plates.
You know, you're right. This isn't just some abstract theory.
Yeah.
Just this morning, I was thinking about it while sipping my coffee.
Okay.
The beans, sourced from South America, roasted here in the city, part of a global supply chain that spans continents.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-boggling when you stop to think about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that this web of connections, as one of our sources called it, is constantly evolving.
Right.
It's the flow of goods, like your coffee beans, but also the movement of people, ideas, and capital across international borders.
Yeah.
We're seeing businesses operating on a global scale, technology connecting us instantaneously, and cultural influences intermingling like never before.
It's like the world is shrinking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, this interconnectedness, is it always a good thing?
Wow.
Because some of the research we have here paints a pretty complicated picture, talking about globalization as a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. One of the economists we read about makes a compelling argument about this very point.
Okay.
He acknowledges the potential for economic growth and development that globalization can bring, but he also highlights the potential downsides.
Okay.
The widening gap between the haves and the have-nots, the exploitation of workers, and the risk of cultural homogenization. It's like for every step forward, there's a potential step back.
Yeah.
And speaking of steps back, one of the articles we have features a quote from a chef who's worried about the impact of global fast food chains pushing out traditional cuisine.
Right.
He sees it as a threat to his culture's culinary heritage.
And his concern speaks to that tension we see between cultural exchange and cultural dilution.
Right?
On one hand, exposure to different cultures can be incredibly enriching, broadening our horizons and fostering understanding.
Sure.
But as the chef's example highlights, it can also lead to the erosion of unique traditions and the dominance of global brands over local businesses.
Yeah.
Have you noticed this in your own community, by the way?
Definitely. I mean, that little bookstore downtown where I spent hours browsing,
Yeah.
it had to shut down because it couldn't compete with the online giant.
It's hard not to feel a sense of loss.
It is, and it underscores how globalization plays out in our everyday lives, in the choices we make as consumers, and in the cultural landscape of our communities.
Yeah.
But it's not just about economics and culture, right?
Right.
Globalization also plays a critical role in how we address global challenges like, well, climate change.
Yeah. And speaking of climate change, that's where this web of interconnectedness becomes impossible to ignore.
Right.
It's like we're all standing on this one planet, and what happens in one corner affects us all.
Yeah.
The source material mentioned the devastating floods in Bangladesh last year, a stark reminder that climate change doesn't discriminate.
Absolutely. One of the activists we read about argued that isolated attempts to combat climate change are practically useless. We're dealing with rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and resource scarcity. These are global problems that demand global solutions.
And it's not just about environmental consequences, is it?
Right.
It feels like climate change also magnifies existing inequalities.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The source material highlighted that while climate change affects everyone,
Right.
it doesn't affect everyone equally.
Right.
Developing countries often bear the brunt of the impacts. Despite contributing the least to the problem,
Right.
they face greater risks from droughts, floods, and rising sea levels, which can devastate their economies and displace communities.
It's like you're being hit with a double whammy.
Yeah.
Facing the consequences of a problem they didn't create, while also lacking the resources to adapt and recover. And that makes me think about the whole issue of economic disparity, which seems deeply intertwined with globalization.
It's a crucial point.
Yeah.
One of the podcasts we listened to really drove home the fact that the gap between the rich and the poor, both within and between countries, is widening.
Right.
And this isn't just a moral issue. It poses a significant threat to global stability.
You're right. They actually cited some pretty alarming statistics about income inequality. showing that a tiny percentage of the global population now holds a disproportionate amount of the world's wealth.
Exactly. And this kind of economic polarization creates fertile ground for instability.
Right.
When a large segment of the population feels left behind economically,
Yeah.
it erodes trust in institutions, fuels social unrest, and can even lead to political extremism. There was a powerful quote from a community leader in one of our sources. When people are desperate, they become vulnerable to dangerous ideologies that promise simple solutions to complex problems.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
So it's like globalization has the potential to lift people out of poverty, but if it's not managed in a way that benefits everyone, it can backfire, creating even more division and instability.
It's a delicate balancing act.
Right.
And it requires us to think critically about the rules that govern the global economy, about issues like fair trade labor rights and equitable access to resources.
Okay.
Because when we talk about a globally connected world, it shouldn't just be the privileged few who reap the benefits.
Absolutely. Everyone deserves a seat at the table, right?
Yeah.
But with all these complex issues swirling around, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, even helpless. So what can we as individuals actually do?
Right.
I mean, we're not policymakers or CEOs of multinational corporations.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to navigate this complex, interconnected world and make a positive impact?
Those are great questions and ones that I grapple with myself. And honestly, there's no single easy answer. But I do think there are things we can do both in our personal lives and as engaged citizens to create ripples of change.
It can feel daunting, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to change the direction of a giant ship.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned ripples.
Yeah.
Where do we even start making those?
One of the things that struck me in the research was the emphasis on individual action.
Okay.
It might sound cliche, but our everyday choices really do matter.
Right.
Like the chef we talked about earlier, trying to preserve his cultural heritage, supporting local businesses.
Yeah.
Even in small ways can make a difference.
So like choosing the family-owned restaurant down the street instead of the international fast food chain.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about being conscious of where we spend our money,
Yeah.
recognizing that we're voting with our wallets every day,
Right.
supporting sustainable practices, advocating for fair trade policies. These seemingly small actions, multiplied across millions of people, can create a powerful wave of change.
It's about feeling empowered, not powerless in the face of these global challenges.
Yeah.
But it's not just about our shopping habits, is it?
Right.
What about staying informed?
Yeah.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information out there.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It can feel like information overload, but that's where being selective comes in.
Choose reputable sources of information. Dive deeper into issues you're passionate about. Even just having informed conversations with friends and family can help raise awareness and inspire action.
It's like that saying, knowledge is power, but knowledge without action is well.
It's like a seed that's never planted. It has potential, but it needs fertile ground to grow.
Yeah.
So find ways to use that knowledge to connect with others who share your concerns and to advocate for solutions.
This has been an incredible deep dive. It's given me a lot to think about, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for guiding us through these complex issues and, more importantly, for reminding us that we all have a role to play in shaping a more just and sustainable future.
It's been my pleasure. And for you listening, remember that even amidst the complexities of globalization, there's always hope. By staying informed, making conscious choices, and raising our voices, we can create a ripple effect that contributes to a better world for everyone.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Be sure to join us next time for another fascinating exploration of the world around us. Until then, keep those brain cells buzzing.